Can a trade war with China be won? U.S. President-elect Donald Trump vows to put America first, promising up to 60% tariffs on Chinese imports. So will we see a stronger U.S. economy at China's expense, or a lose-lose scenario to make the global economy suffer? I'm Andrea Sankin. Today's newsmaker is the U.S.-China relationship.
Despite the fact that the goal of Trump's trade war with China was to bring jobs back to the United States, it appears that China is doing better than expected. China has increased its focus on self-reliance, investing heavily in domestic technology, and diversifying its trade ties with other countries, despite the imposition of stringent tariffs and restrictions on technology. What is the end result? Despite the fact that consumers in the United States are bearing rising costs and the trade deficit in the United States has remained largely unchanged, China's economy has adapted and grown stronger. At this moment, the question is becoming more pressing as Trump indicates a return to his hardline tactics. Do these strategies have the potential to backfire, and do they have the potential to actually speed up China's rise in the long run? When Donald Trump first ran for president in 2016, one of his primary campaign promises was to take a firm stance against China's trade practices, which he claimed were detrimental to American businesses and workers. China's trade practices were a source of concern for Trump. Following his transition from reality television star to politician, the individual made a commitment to impose severe tariffs on Chinese imports and to directly confront Beijing's alleged unfair economic strategies. This populist message that put America first struck a chord with a significant number of voters who had become dissatisfied with what they perceived to be the loss of jobs in domestic manufacturing and the widening of the trade deficit with China.
When Trump took office in 2017, he did not waste any time in putting his campaign promises into action upon taking office. Over the course of the subsequent 4 years, his administration imposed a slew of tariffs and trade restrictions with the intention of punishing China and rebalancing the economic scales in favor of the United States. The President of the United States made a proud declaration that the word tariff is a beautiful word and threatened to impose tariffs of up to 60% on all Chinese goods that are imported into the United States market.
During his first term, President Trump started a trade war with China, imposing high tariffs on many Chinese goods. And Beijing retaliated, placing its own tariffs against the US. The current US President Joe Biden kept those tariffs in place and even increased some of them.
As President Trump gets ready to return to the White House for a second term, the reality on the ground paints a very different picture than what is being portrayed for him. The data demonstrates that China has emerged from the trade war in a stronger position, whereas the United States has struggled to achieve the outcomes that it desired. This is despite the fact that the president has taken a confrontational approach. In point of fact, there are experts who argue that the actions taken by Trump may have inadvertently assisted China in enhancing its technological capabilities and global influence, which would, in the long run, be detrimental to the economic and geopolitical interests of the United States. During the first 4 years of his presidency, President Trump aggressively pursued a trade policy that prioritized the United States of America and portrayed China as the primary antagonist. Beginning with levies ranging from 10 to 25% on products ranging from agricultural goods to steel and aluminium, his administration imposed a series of tariffs on a wide range of Chinese imports in 2011. These tariffs were imposed over the course of 2011. The purpose of this was to protect domestic industries, bring the massive trade deficit that the United States had with its economic rival to a lower level, and force Beijing to come to the table for negotiations. The Trump administration also imposed a number of restrictions on the transfer of key technologies to China, particularly in the semiconductor and artificial intelligence industries. These restrictions were implemented in addition to the tariffs. The objective was to impede China's capacity to rapidly develop its own technological capabilities and to challenge the United States' preeminence in these crucial fields, which were regarded as essential for both economic competitiveness and military dominance. There was an immediate effect brought about by these measures. American consumers and businesses were forced to pay higher prices for goods made in China, which resulted in a significant decrease in the amount of goods imported from China into the United States. A significant achievement for Trump was the reduction of the trade deficit with China, which went from a high of $419 billion in 2018 to $310.8 billion in 2020. Trump hailed this reduction as a significant victory. On the other hand, the effects on a wider scale were more complicated. Despite the fact that the tariffs caused disruptions in global supply chains and compelled some manufacturing to move away from China, the majority of the production that was moved away from China simply moved to other low-cost countries in Asia, rather than having it returned to the United States. The additional costs were ultimately borne by American consumers, with studies estimating that the tariffs cost the typical household in the United States more than $1,200 annually. While this was going on, China was dealing with its own set of domestic problems that posed a threat to the country's economic expansion.
The collapse of several major developers sparked concerns about a wider property crisis, which in turn caused the real estate market in the country to be in a state of turmoil. The outlook was further hampered by the fact that local governments were also struggling to deal with a mountain of debt. China, on the other hand, has shown remarkable resilience and adaptability in the face of Trump's trade onslaught, rather than imploding under the weight of the challenge. Particularly in strategic industries such as semiconductors and renewable energy, the government in Beijing has increased its efforts to boost domestic technological innovation and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. This is particularly the case in domestic semiconductor manufacturing. China's efforts to cultivate its own capabilities that are on par with those of the world's best were accompanied by significant investments backed by the state in domestic research and development. In areas such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and advanced manufacturing, the country has made significant progress, which has led to the striking results that have been achieved.
For instance, China's share of global high-tech exports has significantly increased over the past few years, particularly in the electric vehicle EV sector. This is despite the fact that the United States has adopted trade restrictions. In addition to this, China has been making efforts to broaden its commercial partnerships by establishing new economic alliances with nations located in Latin America, Africa, and Europe. While this has helped to mitigate the effects of decreased exports to the United States, it has also contributed to the strengthening of Beijing's geopolitical influence across the world. Instead of stifling China's economic aspirations, the trade war that Trump has been waging has had the unintended consequence of bolstering the nation's efforts to achieve technological self-sufficiency. In response to the restrictions imposed by the United States on the transfer of technology, China has been compelled to redouble its efforts to develop critical capabilities within its borders, frequently with the full support of the state. Specifically, this boomerang effect has been especially noticeable in the semiconductor industry, which is one sector in which China has made significant progress over the past few years. China is rapidly closing the gap between itself and the United States and its allies in terms of the most advanced chip manufacturing. Some analysts estimate that China could achieve parity within the next 5 to 10 years, despite the fact that the country is still behind in this regard. One of the most striking examples of China's progress occurred in 2023, when Bloomberg News commissioned a research firm to disassemble Huawei's Mate 60 smartphone. The researchers discovered a semiconductor that was significantly more powerful than anyone had anticipated China would be able to produce on its own. This was discovered inside the device. Although it is commonly believed that China's semiconductor ecosystem is 8 to 10 years behind that of the United States, this evidence suggested that China's ecosystem is actually only 4 to 5 years behind. There will be significant repercussions as a result of this technological accomplishment. The ability of the United States to restrict the transfer of critical technologies is a key pillar of strategic dominance for the United States. If China is able to continue to narrow the gap in areas such as semiconductors, it could undermine this core pillar. As a result, this gives rise to concerns regarding the potential military and geopolitical repercussions, given that advanced chips are not only necessary for consumer electronics,
but also for cutting-edge defense systems and emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing. In addition, the strain that is being placed on relations between the United States and China has wider geopolitical implications, which could potentially weaken the United States' global leadership and the strength of its alliances. Some of Washington's traditional partners in Europe and Asia have become increasingly wary of getting caught in the crossfire as a result of the administration's more confrontational approach. This has resulted in tensions and a sense of unease regarding the future of the international order. The aforementioned dynamic has resulted in the creation of opportunities for China to expand its own influence, particularly in the developing world. Beijing has been able to strengthen its economic and diplomatic ties with a variety of countries by portraying itself as a viable alternative to the system that is led by the United States. Thus, Beijing has been able to further undermine the global standing of the United States. While Trump is getting ready to return to the White House, he has made it abundantly clear that his uncompromising stance towards China will not change and may even become even more extreme. In his campaign rhetoric, the former president has threatened to impose tariffs on Chinese goods that are even more severe, which could potentially escalate the trade war to new heights.